So here we are, civilization in ruins, mankind on the brink of extinction, and centuries of progress wiped out in an instant. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, things could be better. Unfortunately, they were also about to get a whole lot worse. Well, I mean, relatively worse. The post-apocalyptic stage was set, and a new chapter was beginning for humanity in what is now known as the Dark Age, a time of chaos, suffering, and war. And war never changes. Sorry, couldn't resist. In the time that immediately followed the collapse, the scattered remnants of humankind struggled to find their feet in what was left of the world they knew. Exos climbed from the rubble, their memories irreparably damaged, and even some of the Awoken resurfaced on Earth after their little cosmic caper. Many of the remaining survivors banded together to form settlements out in the wilderness, but unfortunately, for one reason or another, most didn't last particularly long. Earth had suddenly become a much more dangerous place to be. Infighting was always going to be a problem, you know what humans are like. Without the rule of law, some saw the opportunity to simply take what they wanted from others, and for a time, the only law that mattered was who had the biggest gun. If things weren't bad enough, the Traveller's ghosts had begun to find their targets and created the first Risen from among the dead, which sounds great, right? It's the origin story of our heroes. Well, as it turns out, the Risen of old were nothing like the Guardians we know of today. Whilst the Traveller had blessed them with new life and functional immortality, it had failed to give them any sort of moral compass to guide them. Sorry, any effective moral compass. I think we can all see where this is going. The first Risen, bereft of any personality or scruples they may have had before shuffling off their respective mortal coils, simply whooped back into the world, and many of them were soon corrupted by the power the Traveller had bestowed upon them. What's that thing Spider-Man always says? As you might imagine, the power to resurrect from beyond the grave was more than enough to capture the imagination of the poor, beleaguered masses, and many of the Risen garnered enough of a following to become infamous warlords who terrorised and subjugated the remaining population. I mean, if you can't become a bandit king with your new superpowers, then what's the bloody point? The warlords and their factions would squabble over what little humanity had left, and for a long time, chaos and anarchy reigned at the leisure of these newly born immortals. However, not all Risen were so affected by the Traveller's gifts. A meagre few of those that retained their integrity and a sense of justice united to form the Iron Lords, a group dedicated to ending the warlords' tyranny and bringing order to what was left of civilization. As time went on, the Iron Lords' ranks swelled in number, and they slowly but surely picked off the warlords plaguing the populace. One warlord in particular, the hermit-like Exo named Fellwinter, ruled over a stretch of land in Old Russia. After a fateful meeting with a member of the Iron Lords, Fellwinter ended up joining the cause, and as a sign of his new loyalty, donated his stronghold fortress on Fellwinter Peak to serve as a base of operations that they renamed the Iron Temple. Top lad, that one! As the Iron Lords helped to secure a strained peace for their corner of the world, rumours began to spread of a safe haven in the shadow of a certain spectacular sleeping spheroid. The Traveller was still indirectly helping people even during its nap time, acting as some sort of celestial nightlight to scare away all the monsters. Oh, how sweet. Many wayward groups decided to search for this sanctuary, and the Risen that pledged to guard them in their quest became the first Titans, stalwart defenders of humanity known as the Pilgrim Guard, and the precursors to an absolute pain in my arse. Moving on. Whilst the warlords were being pacified and their factions dissolved or driven away, another threat had been slowly creeping its way throughout the solar system. Unknown to humanity, the Traveller had not actually chosen them as its first benefactor. Long before mankind's golden age, another race had been blessed with the honour of being the Traveller's little pet project. In their own language, they call themselves the Elixni, but we know them as the Fallen. Little bit on the nose. In their distant history, the Fallen were a meritocracy organised into great and noble houses, led by those who had earned their way to the top. They too were once graced by the Traveller, whom they called the Great Machine, and in their golden age managed to colonise multiple star systems. Sort out humanity, letting the side down here. Like us, they too suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the Darkness in an event they called the Whirlwind. The key difference here being that the Traveller just sort of pissed off and left them to their fate. Lovely. In the aftermath of the catastrophe that destroyed their world, a bloody civil war took place that eventually ended in a tenuous alliance between the last of the Grey Houses. The remaining Fallen packed up their shit and boarded huge ships called ketches in order to undertake a perilous journey to reclaim the Traveller and restore their civilization to its former glory. I wouldn't feel sorry for them just yet. Shortly after the collapse, the first Ketchers arrived in our solar system, and like a pack of vultures, the Fallen began stripping the ruined human colonies of anything useful they could get all four of their hands on. Eventually they made their way to Earth, where they began to terrorise humankind, having fully transformed themselves into a nomadic legion of ruthless raiders and scavengers, and becoming just one more threat to humanity's continued existence. Everybody wants a piece. Whilst the Fallen would go on to prove themselves to be a formidable adversary of mankind, another very different but equally dangerous alien race arrived in our solar system with conquest on the brain. They were known as the Cabal, a race of huge, bloodthirsty rhinoceros-like creatures with a gargantuan empire that spanned countless systems and worlds. The Cabal, whilst still formidable even before, had not always been such a brutal and militaristic people. Once upon a time, they were a much more refined bunch, valuing willpower, intelligence, and subtlety, with even debate considered a form of warfare. The Empire would use their technological prowess and not inconsiderable military might to indoctrinate, bully, and assimilate the various species they came into contact with into their culture. Their beloved Emperor Callus led his people into an age of hedonism and gluttony, their every whim catered to and their every need satisfied. The Cabal were living the life. Just imagine a bunch of rhinos off their tits in togas spilling their guts into some lukewarm bathwater before going for another swig. Of course, like the Roman Empire, there was discord amongst the Emperor's followers. The short version of this story is that Gaul, the leader of the Cabal's elite Red Legion, led a coup against Callus and exiled him aboard a giant spacefaring pleasure barge pointed off into the middle of nowhere. I think when you compare it to getting shanked in the back, it's a pretty good deal. The newly crowned Dominus Gaul then reorganised the Empire and brought the Cabal into an age of conquest and glory, which unfortunately we became party to shortly after the collapse, when the Cabal fleet invaded with the intention of taking Mars. Thankfully, the Cabal were kept plenty busy when they discovered a Vex collective on the planet, who viciously retaliated to their incursion. The Vex were protecting an entrance to a place of great power called the Black Garden, a realm outside the confines of time and space, often referred to now as the Vex's birthplace. Fortunately for humanity, this war would work in our favour, keeping both parties occupied throughout the Dark Age and well into the time that followed. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the Iron Lords had set out on an expedition they thought would mean salvation for the remains of humanity. Long before Felwinter had joined the Iron Lords in their quest to end the Warlord's reign, he had wandered his lands and found a means to communicate with the warmind Rasputin. Whilst the Great Intelligence remained silent in response to his inquiries, he did in fact learn of the existence of Siva, the wondrous and slightly scary nanomachines that could build and destroy in seconds. Oh boy, here we go. Felwinter revealed this information to the Lords when he joined up with them, so when the last of the Warlords had finally been defeated, the great heroes looked to their next objective, restoring mankind to its former glory. And what better way to do that, you might ask, than by fucking around with highly unsafe technology they didn't understand? After an extensive investigation, the Lords tracked Siva to Site 6, a Golden Age complex in Russia wherein they found their prize unusable without an intelligence to drive it. Fortunately, they managed to reawaken the dormant Rasputin and sought his aid in using Siva to help humanity rebuild. The ancient Warmind, however, grew wary of the armed forces that had come to its door and denied them the use of Siva. I mean, fair enough, if a bunch of medieval knights with assault rifles showed up at my house asking to use the Wi-Fi, I would also be a tad suspicious. To ward them off, he activated the complex's defences, weaponising the Siva against them and sparking a bloody battle. The Lords saw the threat that Siva posed and fought their way to the replication chamber with the intent of destroying what was left of it. Although they managed to detonate explosives within the facility, rendering it inoperable for the time being, it came at the cost of almost all the lives of the Lords that went down there, leaving the Order all but wiped out and Siva a potential threat in the future. Just a terrific job there, guys, well done. Elsewhere on the Big Blue Marble, things were looking a little bit brighter for once, as many of the pilgrims had finally arrived at the Promised Land beneath the Traveller. What started as nothing larger than a festival campground, presumably with all the disgusting caveats that brings, slowly grew into a more permanent settlement. Where tents were once pitched, buildings sprung up beneath the snoozing god, and under the guidance of a mysterious speaker for the Traveller, humans, exos, awoken, and guardians alike at last found a sanctuary they could call their own. This meagre holding would continue to swell with refugees and nomads as they came in droves to unite in the hope of a better future for mankind, and though many threats loomed on the horizon, this would be the place where humanity truly began to rebuild their lost legacy. After a time, this community grew to a size where you could hardly call it a village or town, and it was finally given the name The Last City. I know, terribly imaginative, isn't it? The city would go on to be the site of many trials and triumphs, but until next time, ladies and gentlemen, they will remain a mystery. I mean, assuming you don't just go ahead and read the wiki after this. Hello again everybody, welcome back, and thank you very much for watching this second little stroll in the Destiny universe. If for whatever reason you enjoyed this video, then you can leave a like, and if you'd like to see more of this nonsense, you can subscribe to my channel. I do plan to have another video out before Shadowkeep comes out, rounding out this little series for now. If you'd like to correct me on the millions of ways I got things wrong, please do go down to the comment section and leave something there. But if you'd like to personally berate me and tell me how shit I am, I have a Discord and I occasionally stream on Twitch. Both the links are down below. Once again, everybody, thank you very much for watching. I've been Luke, this has been Chronicler, and you have been absolutely wonderful. An absolute treat, you know? Just a total delight. Ta-ra!